Hello, everyone. My name is Haley Woods. Welcome to Fearless Plus. So today we are here with Mike Grushin. I'm going to be interviewing him today. And so basically, we're showing an overview of what Fearless Expert Series is. And Fearless Expert Series is a live webinar style series designed to show teens there are countless different career paths and industries available to them. We feature a different Fearless expert who talks about their current role, what their industry is, and what their individual path to success looks like. Students will learn about the expert's unique career journey and how they can leverage skills the expert speaks about to be successful in their own life. The Expert Series is live on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. So, hello.
Hi, Haley.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Good. So I wanted to start off with the first question, and that is, what is your industry and what is its purpose?
So my industry is software development or software engineering, and that industry solves business problems through developing code, developing technologies, developing platforms in order to achieve outcomes, business outcomes usually.
Right.
So if anybody's familiar with macros in Excel, that's a little bit of coding, like it's if-else logic.
Okay. And what is your role today?
Chief Technology Officer.
Okay. And what exactly is that?
I work with clients. So by now, I've been in this software engineering industry for 24 years now. And by now, I understand quite a bit about business and I understand quite a bit about technology. And I help business side take advantage of what technology has to offer. And then I work with technology teams to explain to them what business needs and then help them come up with the best possible solution with the least amount of effort.
Right. Okay. And are you helping them with building websites or?
That's So right now, the world that we know today somewhat lives in Web 2.0, and I can explain that. Mm-hmm. We're now moving into introduction of Web 3, if you've heard those terms.
I'm not.
So blockchain, smart contracts, NFTs, virtual reality, metaverse, that's all Web 3.
Right. And so are you helping them set up those NFTs specifically?
We certainly can. And the NFTs by themselves, like they don't provide as much value without all of the Web 2.0 technologies.
Right. Okay. And so I wanted to go back to, that's very interesting, where you are today. But I wanted to go back to the beginning and where you first started. And my first question would be, who were you in high school? And what were your interests? Did you have any favorite subjects? And if you did have any extra subjects, what would be like the extracurriculars that you were doing?
Sure. So my accent is Russian. So I came to America when I was 16. It was back in 92. I know for some of them, it's my kids joke that, or we joke with our kids that this is right after the dinosaurs died. Like this is when we were born.
Right.
Right. I know it was a long time ago. I came with my family. We didn't speak English all that much. Ended up in Brooklyn, New York. So for the first 3 years, focus was on learning English. And then I went to Stony Brook University. So the subjects that I was good at, a lot of this science and math. And part of it is because in Soviet Union, there was clear separation. Like somewhere around, I think, grade 5 or 6, mm-hmm. you were placed either into a math class or physics class or chemistry or literature. And you were spending way more time on that topic than other classes. So by the time that I came to the United States, I didn't have to take any math classes through college. So whatever I learned through my 10th grade in Ukraine, Soviet Union, that covered everything that college covers. So math was easy. As far as like the other subjects, I was very impressed that logic and computer science and typing were part of the education. Mm-hmm. Everything else was just part of education.
Right. And did you find that you were more stronger in math and science than you were in English and reading and things like that? And you found more interest in those types of things?
Yeah, math always came easy. And then logic is logic, right? Like it's hard to, I didn't find it difficult, even though like that was not a topic that was taught in Soviet Union. English, my English did not improve until way later in life because Brooklyn, New York is like the part that we lived is like it's a Russian Chinatown.
Right.
You don't really need English there. Like my uncle was there for 30 years. He still doesn't speak it.
That is true. I'm from New York, so it's definitely like that. And so what did you, at the time when you were younger, what did you want to be when you grew up?
So we talk about this topic quite often. There was lack of information back then for my parents, and there's still lack of information for parents today.
Right.
As immigrants, and my parents were highly educated, so my mom was an engineer and my dad was a communications officer. They did not know much about the capitalism and how America works, right? Or what are the other options? They knew what the options were in Soviet Union, but what the options here? So the standard options for Eastern European immigrants, and my partner Deepali is Indian, very similar expectations. You either become an engineer or an accountant, doctor, and a lawyer. Right? Like those are essentially were the options. Like there were no, like as if no other profession existed. Lawyer was not really an option because English was not there. Accountant, that did not seem interesting to me. So the other options were either engineer or a doctor. And when I went to college, I went as pre-med.
And did you have any internships in high school?
I did not have, so not internships in any profession. I had jobs. So I was a guidance counselor in summer camp. I delivered newspapers at 6 o'clock in the morning.
How old were you when you were
16.
doing that? 16. So is that when you started working as well, like as early as you can, or was it back in Russia?
So 16 is when we came to America. That was 92. Okay. And we were living on welfare and Medicaid. And right, so this was the time when we actually collected some of the furniture off the street and used it in the house because there was just not enough money to buy anything. So each family member did what we could while studying, also making a couple of dollars. So delivering papers in the morning before high school, that was part of it. Mm-hmm. And then summer was guidance counselor. And guidance counselor is a big word. It's somebody to oversee that kids do not misbehave.
Right. Okay. And so was internships a big thing in Russia, or is that it's more common in America?
I think I learned about the concept of internships in college. I do not remember it being a part of high school conversations.
Okay. It's very interesting.
But my high school was a number of years ago, so I might not remember, but I don't think it was also not a very good high school in Brooklyn. It was, so I don't know how much focus was there on preparation. There's no focus even today, but there was definitely not focus back then.
All right. And you did tell us that you did go to college. And was that your decision to want to go to college, or was it something that your parents were kind of telling you, or that was just the next step after high school?
There was just an expectation from an Eastern European parents, Jewish parents, that you must have a degree. So like I'll give you a little bit of a preview that I started working full-time in my third year. And then it took me 2 years to get my degree. Even though I was like within 2 years, like within that second year of working, I was making more money than my parents because I was in software development. But because my mom and my dad were really focused on, you're not going to succeed in life without a bachelor degree, I took 9 classes and I got my degree.
Your bachelor's degree? My
bachelor's degree, which in my world of computer science means very little.
Right. And so you did get a job straight out of college? Or during college?
So I started as pre-med because that was the options that were considered. So college for me started in 95. At that time, the software development was not a very popular topic yet. It became more popular as Y2K as a problem. Do you know what Y2K, like as a term, what it?
Is it? No. Let's just say that now. Is it like the early 2000s?
It was related to 2000. Okay. So the way that software was written before 2000, in order to save on space, they were using 2-digit code. So 1995, 90, right? So instead of 1995, it was 95, 96. And then they figured out that a lot of systems will not work when it goes from 1999 to 2000. So there was a lot of effort to solve the Y2K problem.
Right.
year 2000 probably, right? So there was more focus on software development. There were a lot of educational institutions that opened up specifically to teach people programming to go help solve that.
All right.
So by the time that I went to college, there was a bit more focus, but definitely not in 92, 93, or at least not that we were aware of.
And would you say that, so you're basically saying that they wanted to hire more people and it was just
they
more
to solve a problem.
Right.
For me, what happened is I went as pre-med and then I started taking biology and chemistry, and as much as I was as good as I was in math and physics, chemistry just did not click. I could not make sense of it. Like this was like one of the few classes where I just didn't work. I didn't do well. But at the same time, I took computer science 101, which was very basic, like how to use a floppy disk, if you know what it means. It's like it's a small SD card, but much, much bigger.
Interesting.
Brittany, I'm glad you're enjoying this. So it was very basic how to use a computer, but part of it, and I clearly remember this, like November, it was cold outside. I went to Stony Brook University. Part of the curriculum was learning how to build your first HTML page. And at that time, Netscape 1.0 just came out, which was top of the line, the cutting edge technology. It's very old by now, obviously not used. And I spent, like, I'm not joking, I spent 48 hours not sleeping doing that. Really? Because it was very rewarding. You do something and then you refresh the page and you see the result. Right? There are not that many, like outside of maybe like, being a chef or landscape or right, there are not that many things where you can change something, instantly see a result, right? Like instant gratification. And that was the point I said, okay, I'm done with pre-med. I'm going to be a software developer.
Wow. And was it something that you had learned during college, or would you say more in college, or a lot of it was also, you said that you knew how to code and everything like that. Was it something that you were teaching yourself?
So my introduction to coding was in college. It was that computer science, that 48 hours was my first. So I used to play Mortal Kombat, which was a very popular PC game back in the 90s. And I played that. And then I did not do any coding until that first semester in my first year. And after that, I started taking classes, just the college classes. Like there was no, like the internet was not as developed as it is today. There was no YouTube, there's no educational websites where you can learn. So you started buying books and you start playing with it. And then there's obviously a curriculum within school, which I must say, I am hoping that today's software developers are learning more relevant things. Because whatever I learned, I did not use a single time. There was one class that I used in my real life or professional life. Everything else was very useless.
What class was that?
Database design.
And so my next question would be, do you feel that everything up until this point prepared you for the real world?
College specifically?
College specifically, I would say.
I think it was a waste of time.
Why would you say that?
I spent most of my time playing Tetris, hanging out with people, and watching Highlander.
So what you're saying is that you had learned a lot of the software skills and everything in college, but a lot of it was learned on your own. So
from the software development perspective, very few classes were relevant. There was zero teamwork. So you're supposed to work on your own. Mm-hmm. And then if you collaborated, it was called cheating, and there was a problem.
Right.
There's nothing in the real world of people working together that you do by yourself.
So you learned it when you actually started the job itself.
When I started the job itself.
Okay.
And that's like, I know from discussions with young people that start a job, that's the reality today as well.
Right. And would you say that your degree that you did have, you had gotten it while you were in college? And so would you say that it would be different now if people were to, do you think it would be easier for people to get a job while they're still in college, or was it because it was so popular back then, the major that you were in? That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So the technology was evolving. There was more and more need for technology, specifically software development, building websites. So I just know these numbers because I looked them up. It's not that I remember them, but recently Amazon went public in 97. eBay went public in 99. So those things already existed, right? So you can go and sell and buy things on eBay. And you could also order books on Amazon. That was the first thing that they were selling. And more businesses were looking to launch e-commerce websites and web presence. So that's the time of Web 1.0. And then around 2000, there was also a .com crash where a lot of these websites and a lot of these digital ideas did not work out.
And so would you say, as I was saying my question before, would you say that now how it is when you do go into a job, they're looking for that degree, whereas back then your major was more popular and they were looking for more people to work in that industry?
So a couple of interesting data points. Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Amazon do not require a college degree. Tesla does not require a high school degree to get a job.
Okay.
A couple of other interesting statements. Mark Cuban, like in the famous billionaire, he made a lot of money in that .com time. The CEO of Alibaba, Jack Ma, Mr. Wonderful on the Shark Tank, right?
Yep.
So they all say about the same thing. They're saying that a couple of years ago, if somebody would ask him, like, what kind of profession should I go into? They would say some type of engineering, mechanical, electrical, software engineering. Now they're strongly suggesting that people should be focusing on some type of a storytelling, emotional intelligence, philosophy, psychology. And the reason is that we live in a world where the technology advancements, like they've always been exponential, but we're now starting to see that, right? That trend, right? Like every year you see a lot of advancements within that. Robotics, artificial intelligence, machine learning. Pretty much anything that can be easily replicated by a machine, it will be. In pretty short term, what is not as easy to replicate is the way that how people communicate and how people get work done. While the technology advances very quickly, if we were to compare ourselves to computers, we do not evolve as quickly as the technology itself.
Right.
And there are certain things that are built into us. We're social creatures. We like to spend time together. We enjoy good storytelling, right? Why are we enjoying good movies? Because of the storytelling aspect of it, right? Good books, that is not going to go away.
Right.
And that is why these very impressive business people are suggesting that the young generation should be focusing on these human soft skills, because we're going to live longer. There will be more of us, right? Medicine is also improving. So the aspect of humans interacting with humans is not going to go away. But the jobs of, just to give you a very simple example, I would imagine you follow Tesla and autonomous vehicles, the cars that drive themselves. Just think about how many truck drivers will need to find a new thing to do in the next couple of years. Like, it's not 20 years from now. And that's just a very, very simple example that's very clear to everyone.
Right. And that's very, very futuristic thinking, which is very important.
The future is going to be here sooner than you can expect.
Yes, definitely. And I think it's very important to have emotional intelligence as well as financial literacy. And I think that to carry on throughout your entire life. So I think that's a really good answer. And so what I wanted to go into was the success framework assessment that you had completed.
Yep.
And I just wanted to know a little bit more about that, and how you got to point A and point B, and see your answers on what that was, the evaluation.
Absolutely. And I can give you a couple of, so this is the Fearless, the success framework, and the focus is on emotional intelligence. And I just gave you a couple of reasons why it's important. The next one is rationality. So I would imagine you've met people in your life that are super smart, but can't figure out how to open a door, right? Or problem solve, or right? That's rationality. And then there's adaptability. So there's this concept that our world is changing at an ever increasing pace. So if you're of the mindset that I don't want to learn anything, anything new is difficult and challenging, that's not going to be good for that person. So the idea is that adaptability is an extremely important part of surviving, right? If you can imagine, just like as a visual that I think we've used in a couple of videos, a tree that bends in the wind will survive a hurricane versus a tree that doesn't, right? And that's a good visual to think about. And the winds of change in technology, medicine, the fact that we're now a global workforce, right?
Right.
It doesn't matter that we are Florida-based. We will be competing with folks in India and Philippines and Russia, because at some point, like, you'll find this number interesting. Only 60% of the world has access to the internet.
I never thought that. That's so interesting.
But that will be solved soon, right? And now you will be competing with people all across the world, because we were on that path anyway, and COVID pushed us along.
Right.
Remote working, remote schooling, and so on. And then the IQ is the way that we define it. It's the intelligence you're born with and knowledge that you acquire. Right. So the idea is you have to learn. There's no question about it. And that's the framework. And then what we're focusing on, if we can switch to the next slide, please. So on the top is the emotional intelligence. And there's a stereotype of a Russian technical person. So I was very much that. So it was 0 or 1, right? Like, that's the computer speak for black and white. Either you're right or you're wrong. Like, there's something in between. And that's not how real world operates, right? There are shades of everything. And if you are being that black and white, like, you're just like, it's hard to work with you. Intelligence, I never had issues. So because the way that we define IQ is intelligence plus knowledge. So obviously when I entered the workforce, I had very little knowledge, especially like useful knowledge, work knowledge. In terms of smartness, I was always smart, and then I needed to acquire knowledge that's relevant. Adaptability. I would say that my adaptability, and we'll see the next chart, is it improved in the last 5 to 7 years. Until that time, I knew technology, but I did not know business. I did not know marketing. I did not know personal development. I did not focus on those things. I just really enjoyed technology, and that's what I focused on. So like, my adaptability was not very high. With that said, like, we did, I was a part of a couple of businesses that we started. Like, unless you have a bit of that adaptability, you're not going to do that, right? You're just going to do what is prescribed by the blueprint of United States progress of your education to your career. And then the rationality, similar. Like, it was not like I was not at 0. Like, I could rationalize and come up with solutions, but it only improved with time. And a lot of it had to do also, like, the more emotional intelligence for me developed, the other aspects started developing as well.
I really think the adaptation, that part of it is extremely important. I would make it similar to maybe like growth and how important it is to be growing every single year and everything like that. And I think this is a really, really interesting.
If you believe in evolution, you should understand why adaptability is an important aspect of some success, right? If the species, like if this certain part of the species did not evolve, with time, it did not survive.
Right. And so I wanted to ask you, how did you get from your first job to where you are today?
So my first job, I got in the 3rd year of college as a part-time. There was a job posting that was available within the university. I went and applied. And like, even within that job, like, and I very clearly remember the manager who interviewed me. And I've learned even from that experience. So his name is Wayne Plord. If he is listening, we still keep in touch. I learned a lot from him. He was not a traditional software developer. He actually came from the actual architecture of building things. And then he did many other things. But this is another interesting point just for teenagers considering the career of software development. There are a lot of analogies to real world of engineering. architecture, foundation. Like you have to build a nice foundation, good foundation for a house. Otherwise, the house will fall apart. All of these things apply to software development, software engineering. So I went for the interview, got the job, right? I did well enough. I remember stressing and because it was the first time that I had one suit, I wear it. And I was fortunate to start working. It was a very small team. I think I was number 8. And in a very small team, you have to do a lot of different things. And I had nice managers. Like he was caring and he saw the potential. And I stayed within that company for 9.5 years, where I went from junior developer to CTO level. I learned a lot. I was very fortunate to have a mentor, Tom Baylor, who I know will be listening. Very grateful, who became my mentor for 20 plus years. And the story there is that if you're good at something, usually you'll be asked to manage people. But nobody teaches you how to manage people, right? And that's part of that psychology, part of communication. In order to be a successful leader, right? Because most people, you should strive to be a leader, not a manager, right? And then there's also shades of leadership. But in order to be a good leader, you have to communicate well. And you're not taught that in high school or college. And that's why within the Fearless, we talk about that quite a bit, how to communicate. So the things that I learned within that 9 years with that mentor is how to communicate better, how to manage up, meaning like, how do I actually manage my boss? Because my boss would always, or my manager would always ask, please do this, that, and that. And then there's like 7 things for me to do, but I can only do 5 within a reasonable period of time. So I learned those things. I learned how to manage people that reported to me, where I was not a difficult manager for them. After that 9.5 years, a friend and I had a startup idea, because within technology world, every developer has a startup idea. We got to execute on it. We executed, worked a lot of hours. We were able to sell what we built to a market research company. And then we started a company that does more of the software, where we build software to solve the business problems, business outcomes for the sports industry. So NFL, PGA Tour, NASCAR, they were all clients, where if you use their app, that's the app that our team would have built.
Right. And so when you had created it with that other person, I wanted to ask you, was that a risk to you?
Yes.
Did that feel at the time like a risk, or you just wanted to go all in when you had first started? Were you nervous about it?
So there are 2 models of how people start a business. There's one model where you just, Tony Robbins uses the burn the boats. You just quit your job and you go 100% at it.
And would you say that's
not what I did? No,
okay.
I had a full-time job, and you start doing things at night and weekends. Right? Like an interesting number to think about is that we all have 168 hours in a week, right? 7 days, 24 hours. It's how you spend those 168. Average American spends 2.5 hours watching TV every single day.
That was crazy.
That is crazy, right? That's the time that can be used. So I didn't have kids. I didn't have a mortgage. So it's less about mortgage is about the risk, right? Like if you have a mortgage, you have to pay for stuff, like that's just risk. So at that time, it was nights and weekends until it got to some level. And then you quit your full-time job and you double down on that. So that's one of the things that I agree with many things that Tony Robbins says. This is one of them that I do not.
Right. And so when you had been working, that was essentially your side hustle. That was something that you were working on the side. And would you say that it was difficult when you had gotten off of work or anything like that? Was it hard for you to work on that, or you were just really determined to want to start that?
I love technology. I love playing, I love building computers. So this was just another thing to master and figure out. And this is also something that it's, when you build your business, it's like your baby, right? Like you care about it, And we were also solving pretty interesting technology problems, right? Which was a big part of why I felt passionate about it, because the technology, like software developers, like that's what they want to do, like solve problems.
Right. And so out of all of the skills you learned, and you told me about how you had a mentor and everything, would you say that you value soft skills over hard skills?
If I were to look at the success that I've had, the technology part of it is definitely important. But if I wouldn't learn how to communicate with team members, if I was a lone developer, there are some professions like in Wall Street, or like where your brain has to work on a different scale.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if you cannot communicate with others. Like they'll find a way, because like you provide so much value, because you understand math models and everything else. That's a very unique skill set. Like those people need to exist. Like there's a reason, like there's a way for them to be successful. In the rest of the world, software engineering specifically, you have to work as a part of a team. You have to either communicate with business analysts or project managers or clients, and you have to understand how non-technical people think. And that is part of empathy, right? To think about what is it that the other side, how they think about, what they care about, and what can I do to improve their life.
And so what you're saying is that having a team and teamwork is the most important. It's not good to just do it entirely on your own.
And knowing how to be a good team member.
Right.
And that's that emotional intelligence.
Right. So it all ties in.
So there is a reason, like like formula. So there's a reason why it's there. There's also logic to importance to the order of things that we put. So it's EQ, emotional intelligence. And part of it is also psychology and understanding who you are, why you feel certain ways, and when you have a certain emotion. So I used to, and this was a combination of mentor and also becoming a parent. I used to react in a much more rude way when I was early in my career. Right now, I take a pause and I'm able to catch some of these feelings and then think about like, why is this person saying this and what else can it mean? And that's emotional intelligence. And then rationality is problem solving, like on a team, especially in this high technology world. There's always a problem to be solved. This technology doesn't work, or this business, the business need changed, right? We spoke about the technology change becoming ever more increasing. The business is changing just as frequently and just as quickly. So being able to adapt and then continuous learning. But it's the emotional intelligence that I would probably point to as the bigger part of what made me successful. So the last company that I exited, we built a company from four friends, four co-founders, to 350 people across 6 offices globally.
It's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people.
Yeah. All of the questions that I've asked, I think that you gave me a lot of insight and a lot of things to learn from you. So I want to say thank you for being a part of this. And if there's any questions from anyone.
I think we have another slide to look at, or is it a summary? Right. So I think this is like where I would evaluate myself on today's. These types of scales are interesting to discuss, right? Anybody that says that there are 5, it's an interesting observation, right? Because it means that you achieve their maximum. Like, I do not believe in perfect. There's no such thing. What I believe is in continuous improvement, continuous working towards something, right? So that's why I had, even though I know I made a lot of progress, for me, this is going to be always a continuous improvement to get better across those, all of them. So where I am now, I believe, right? And the feedback that I've been getting from others is that I do pretty well across all of these, including emotional intelligence, which was almost non-existent in the beginning.
Right. Interesting. So is there any questions anyone has?
So we've got our first question here. As you mentioned that you are constantly doing things to improve across all 4 points in the equation. What do you do to continuously improve your emotional intelligence?
So I very much believe in the concept of personal development. And that can take a number of different shapes. So I've gone through different in-person events before COVID. Many of them migrated to online and they do a good job, right? So Tony Robbins is one of them. So he is a good example whose business was very much in person, and he figured out how to make it just as effective and reach even more people online. It's reading books, and I'm seeing a few books supporting, right, from Napoleon Hill to Jay Shetty. I love the Humankind book. So reading books, Jack Canfield comes to mind just because I've been following him for the last 3 years. What's interesting is most people know him for the Chicken Soup for the Soul, but he also has a number of books around success principles. And another interesting data point, psychology as a science only exists for about 200 and change years. It was like late 1800s it was developed. And we're still figuring out how we work as humans. Like the models of how our brain operates and what makes us happy have been evolving over these 200 years, right? Because it didn't exist before. We didn't really think about it. Philosophers did think about like the meaning of life and why we do certain things, but the science of us was only 200 and change. So we're still learning as an industry, right? So the idea is following interesting people. I might mispronounce the name, Huberman Lab. Highly recommend. He is a brain PhD scientist that publishes a lot of interesting topics. So it's finding credible people and focusing on personal development. So that's how I would, I would suggest that whoever is interested in that world of developing emotional intelligence, and then taking a pause, analyzing where the feeling is coming from. And that's going to be covered in whoever teaches you personal development, because like analyzing your own feelings is a big part of it, and not reacting on the first emotion that comes up. Not an easy one.
Second question for you. If you could give your 17-year-old self some advice, what would it be?
So what's interesting, like my 17-year-old, like there was no YouTube, there was no internet, was just at the beginning of it. But at the same time, some of these books, Napoleon Hill, Jack Canfield, Tony Robbins, they've been around even at that time. I would focus on some of the fundamentals that are more important than playing Tetris or watching TV. It's learning about yourself, psychology. And another fun memory that I have when in college, somebody would tell me that they're a psychology major, like I would be just like, how are they going to make money, right? And why is it important? And now I think completely differently. So I would learn about psychology. I would learn how to communicate. And communication, like the English was definitely a focus, but everything from Toastmasters and improv classes. If you can communicate well, you can get your point across, and that means you can get things done in a way that you would not be if your communication is not up there. And I would focus on personal finance and small business, understanding how that world works, because I'm not sure if it's a conspiracy theory, but there's a reason, I believe there's a reason why these things are not taught in school. Because the American blueprint for how teenagers were supposed to go from high school to college to mortgage and lease a car and plant a tree was the idea that you have a loan to pay. And that means you have to get a job. And W-2 is the least efficient way of making money.
Great advice, not just to yourself, but to the rest of our audience, I think. That is it for questions, Haley. I think you're good to wrap up.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.